Right then, so we come to the end of the book, which is your last chapter, chapter number 6, which is titled as Leadership is a Choice Not Everyone Can Make. And Jocko Willing, the quintessential Navy SEAL and the author of the book Extreme Ownership, offers this very insightful perspective to us. When it comes to standards as a leader, it's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. It's very, very insightful that you are gauged by what you tolerate and not what you say. And I can't get a better example of how leadership engine works than our own ISRO. And I start this chapter with this leadership style of ISRO and going back all the way to the August 1979 when the SLV-3 crashed and out came the leader in the form of Kalam. The thing about leadership is that you can never manage enough to suddenly start leading. Often what happens is that if you are an individual contributor, you would really want to have people under you and then more people under them so that you can balloon up. And you will have a sort of a pyramid below you. And you assume that because you have so many people reporting under you, you are a leader. No, you are a manager, not a leader. Okay, so leadership is not about how many people report under you or how big is your span of control. Leadership is all about thinking differently. Leadership is all about maybe taking risk, and management could possibly be about avoiding risk, avoiding ruin. And for you to be a leader, what you need to have is a soul in the game and not a skin in the game. And that is where I talk about Oppenheimer, the man behind the Manhattan Project, and how Oppenheimer could convince the likes of Fermi and Einstein and others to work, Feynman, others to work for him, who would not generally work with each other because of their scientific and egoistic clashes. Because he had a skin in the game, he could convince people about how important this entire enterprise is. We also talk about Sam Manekshaw. Manekshaw is allegedly one of the most successful majors, leaders that we had in the Indian Armed Forces. At one point of time, he had more than 11 lakh people under his command. Okay, when we fought the 1971 war to form Bangladesh, which was then East Pakistan. So I talk about the case study of how Manekshaw went about, or Phil Knight, how he had a skin in the game when he created this enterprise that we today know as Nike. Christopher Nolan, when he makes his movies, he really brings the best that he has to offer, not because of monetary perspective, but also the soul that he has in the game. Offer your team air cover while they experiment wildly. I maintain that leaders are not supposed to give ideas. Leaders are not supposed to invent, but leaders are supposed to protect those who invent, protect those who innovate. And if you are failing to protect the people under your command, and if you are really not shielding them from the wrath of the external world, not much you can do. And here we have some very insightful examples from the famous skunk work of Lockheed Martin to the program at SpaceX, where Elon Musk is shielding his team, rallying his team, no doubt, but also shielding his team from the external vagaries. We have amazing example from the Xerox PARC Center, where the leadership really stood the test of time with regards to how do we have a foresight. Sam Walton, I talk about. And then, of course, we go back to Dhoni on how he shielded his team against the opposition, internal, external conflict, and yet have them deliver both in 2007 and 2011. Design a climate through asymmetric incentives. Now, one of the tools that leaders have at their hand is incentivizing people. And unfortunately, not many leaders use incentive mechanisms very widely, at least not beyond money. And I believe that the more creative, the more effective leaders have a lot of, latitude in terms of how do they use financial and non-financial rewards and punitive measures both. And I offer how asymmetric incentives can be very useful to you. So how do you understand this figure? So on the x-axis is success or failure of a project, and in the y-axis is the organizational response. It could be either reward or a punishment. And you can have two types of activities: a routine activity, which typically endorses less of a risk, and the second is an experiment. When you're doing a routine activity and you succeed wildly, the reward has to be modest. But if you fail, the punishment has to be severe. At the same time, if you're doing a routine activity and you even slightly so succeed, the reward has to be handsome, because you have to create more incentives for people to take risks and go away from the routine mechanisms. However, when there is a bit of failure, you can either rap somebody on the knuckle or you can still give the reward for trying it out. And the reason why innovation suffers in most organizations is because leaders don't punish failed routine activities. And leaders don't encourage successful experiments. So that's a hint for all of you in terms of how do we really utilize the power of punishments and rewards to modulate people's behavior. Be vulnerable by choice. Now, most leaders would try to fake it till they make it. However, if you look at coaches like Adam Grant and Marshall Goldsmith, a lot of other people who have really studied leaders closely, they'll call out that leaders have this ability to be vulnerable by design, by choice. They never come across as know it all, do it all, been there, done it kind of people. Because then if they pose themselves like those omnipotent, invisible souls, then they clearly intimidate people around them. And we have amazing example of people like Satya Nadella, who is an epitome of empathy, compassion, and vulnerability by choice. And I talk about a very interesting episode. Similarly, Walt Disney, he was so humble in a sense that he always called himself as a bee, who is just about cross-pollinating the ideas between artists, and that he doesn't have any particular skill. So that is the end of this chapter, and incidentally the end of the book. A short chapter nonetheless, because leadership has been so much spoken about leadership. So I thought what I have to offer, and the only thing I can offer here is about how do we bring humility and compassion to leadership, and how do you really utilize the incentive mechanisms, put yourself in the line of fire when you're shielding your team, especially when they're trying to do anything creative. So that's about it. That is your chapter number 6. So I hope this was useful. So once again, here is the book, Design Your Career, and I would strongly recommend you to pick a copy of the book. The idea of making this video was to sensitize you about the book and about the need for having such dialogues and discussions, but a full deep dive into the book is highly recommended. I hope the series of videos was useful to you. Would love to hear from all of you. Thank you so much.